Port Charles seldom sleeps, and when it does, it dreams in storms. The coming week opens with thunder over the Quartermain gates, where a stranger's shadow stretches across a legacy that has weathered empires, betrayals, and more than a few funerals. Ronnie, introduced not as a polite footnote in a family tree but as Monica's assertive sister, steps onto the lawn and declares that the estate, the portraits, the history, the acres themselves should be hers by right. She does not raise her voice, she does not have to. Her claim lands like a gavel. Inside, Tracy squares her shoulders with a familiar iron, the kind that has held this family upright through recessions and revolutions in hospital corridors. Ownership, Tracy argues, is not a matter of paperwork alone but of stewardship, of who will keep the heart of the Quartermain legacy beating. Her answer is swift and strategic: transfer the estate to Michael and his children, move the chess piece before a new player learns the board. No Quartermain skirmish stays private for long. Within hours, legal pads multiply like hydrangeas in spring. Tracy taps Marco Rios, a tactician with a fondness for immaculate filings and unforgiving deadlines, a man who understands that the right clause can be worth more than the largest endowment. Ronnie, undeterred, signals toward Martin, a counselor whose charm walks hand in hand with a ledger of victories that never quite discloses the fine print. Their looming duel promises a trial that will not be confined to courtrooms. It will snake through hallways, whisper across ELQ conference tables, and settle into the silences around the Quartermain breakfast table where empty chairs ache louder than accusations. As that battle lines itself in black ink, the city inhales a different kind of shock. A rumor moves first, thin as smoke, then thickens into a name: Nathan. It surges down elevators and across nurses' stations, swelling into a wave that crashes straight into the past. He should not be here, yet here he is, breathing, standing, undoing 100 griefs in an instant, and stitching new mysteries right behind them. Britt stands at the center of the commotion like a lightning rod, catching every question with eyes that say more than her guarded answers allow. She knows something. Port Charles can read guilt the way other towns read weather, and if she has held the truth tight, there was a reason. A prison, perhaps. A bargain no decent person should be asked to make. People can forgive silence in this town, if the chains that forced it are heavy enough. Jason finds her in the spaces where fluorescent lights soften and voices lower. Two people carved out by loss, they sit with the knowledge that grief is not linear, that it turns corners and doubles back when you least expect it. There is comfort here, uncomplicated, unromanticized, the kind that passes a cup of coffee across the table and waits while the steam carries the ache away. He is still the son stunned by a mother's sudden absence, she is still the woman faulted for secrets that may not be hers to spend. The quiet between them is not empty, it is a promise to keep one another from falling into the same dark stairwell again. Elsewhere, Drew wears his mourning like a bruise he refuses to shield. Monica was not his mother by blood, and that difference taunts him at odd hours, as though grief should be lighter when it lacks a genetic signature. Anyone who knew her knows better. She raised him with the firm, exacting love that the Quartermains reserve for stubborn sons who insist on forging their own map. That kind of love leaves a mark, and the absence of it is a winter that lingers. Drew tries to metabolize the sorrow through work, through duty, through the old illusions of control, and finds every avenue detoured by fresh complications, chief among them a bullet that introduced itself without permission and a judge whose death turned questions into indictments. The PCPD, for its part, has grown allergic to coincidences. Drew's shooting and Judge Heron's murder sit side by side on a murder board, string and pins tracing the geometry of danger. Evidence becomes a tide. It flows in, recedes, leaves behind a strange glitter of half-truths and unlucky alibis. Michael's name, reluctant, appears in a corner underlined twice, not as a suspect but as a problem. An escort service is not a crime, it is, however, a terrible character witness during a custody hearing. Paper trails rarely keep secrets, and the ones that try often fray under fluorescent lights and stern questions. Michael may not be guilty of anything beyond bad judgment, but in court, optics can be louder than facts, and parenthood is graded on a different curve when a judge's chair sits empty because someone made sure she would never return to it. In a city accustomed to second chances, the living sometimes return like postcards from a better hour. For Nina, Nathan's reappearance is not a headline, it is the restoration of breath. Joy arrives with a double echo, hers and Liesel's, both women refugees of losses that have rewritten their DNA. The reunion is not simple, it can't be. There are years to reconcile, ghosts to name, 8,000, if only, to lay down like tired weapons. But the first moment is pure, crystalline, uncomplicated by the dirty mortar of explanations. A hug can be more truthful than a sworn statement. A tear can absolve a decade of suspicion. Britt watches all of this with an expression that belongs in the ambiguous gallery between relief and fear. If she has withheld a name, a location, a fact, she may have done so while a lock clicked shut behind her. Survival can look like betrayal when judged by people who never faced your choices. Secrets are not equal. Some are cut from silk, some from barbed wire. The suspicion that Britt knew Nathan's status and could not help him spreads like a rumor always does, a little wrong, a little right, and entirely human. She will answer in time, or she will not, and Port Charles will do what it always does, render a verdict first, reconsider later. Amid these converging storylines, the city hums with another return, one that doesn't ride in on sirens but on memory. Lucky Spencer steps through a familiar doorway, carrying the same collided histories that made him both a prodigal and a compass. His arrival shifts the emotional barometer. Old alliances crack open, old maps are unfolded on kitchen tables that have seen more confessions than dinners. Lucky's presence has a way of making people tell the truth, if only to themselves. He has been where the rest of them are heading, down corridors lit by regret and up staircases warmed by redemption. And he understands that finding your way home requires both a willingness to see and the courage to be seen. The Quartermain estate fight escalates in parallel, a symmetrical drama of ancestry and ambition. Trass's plan to move the property into Michael's line is not merely a maneuver. It is a declaration that the house should belong to the future, not to late arriving claims. Ronnie's narrative counters with blood and principle. If legacy means anything, then a sister's rights should not be dismissed as an inconvenience. Marco Rios builds a fortress out of precedents and trust instruments. Martin sketches a staircase out of equitable arguments and the law's respect for undisclosed kin. The case coaxes witnesses out of their routines, house staff with quiet memories, financial officers with gentle smiles and brittle files, neighbors who saw lights on at odd hours and heard music in rooms no one has used in a decade. In the end, the judge will not rule on sentiment. But sentiment will be everywhere, breathing on the glass of every framed photograph, haunting every clause that chooses a grandson over a sister, or a sister over a legacy designed to outlive them all. Jason threads these worlds together the way he always has, moving from the Quartermain's formal grief to the working-class corners where people carry their sorrows in takeout boxes and folded receipts. He is a son, a friend, a man who has lost too much and therefore knows how to stand still beside someone who is losing. Britt needs that steadiness as the town reinterprets her every blink. Drew needs it as he converts mourning into mission. Nina needs it as joy reattaches itself to the bone after years of drifting. Jason is not the city's conscience, no one can be that, but he is something quieter and more useful, a steady lamplight. Investigators return to the crime board with narrowed eyes. Judge Heron's name glows with the sad importance only the dead possess. Whoever wanted her gone understood leverage. Was the aim to derail a custody battle? To shatter a case that threatened money, power, or freedom? The forensics are a cold language, but the detectives translate it into motives that beat: envy, fear, desperation. They pull apart timelines, reconstruct alibis, and discover how often truth and convenience settle into the same chair. Michael's evening, the one he would least like to recite under oath, drips into the record. A custody hearing has patience for vulnerability but not for hypocrisy, and the distinction between the two is a line good lawyers redraw at will. In quieter rooms, people renegotiate who they are in relation to who they have been. Drew admits that calling Monica "mother" was less about titles and more about the ritual of being seen. Ronnie stares at oil paintings that never made room for her face. Tracy contemplates age, succession, and the possibility that control is a comfort more than a strategy. Britt measures the cost of silence. Nina practices the word "brother" like a prayer she once forgot. Liesl remembers every child she couldn't save and lets the one she can anchor her. Lucky looks out a window and understands that the city did not wait for him, and somehow that is a relief. There is work to do, which means there is purpose to borrow. When the week crests, nothing is finished, but much is revealed. The Quartermain estate has become less a parcel of land and more a battlefield where bloodlines and responsibilities argue without ever quite shaking hands. The mystery of Nathan's survival tilts the city toward hope even as it threatens to topple people who built new lives atop the old graves. Jason and Britt, drawn together by an absence that keeps drawing new circles, find in each other the stamina that houses grief without letting it take the lease. Drew's mourning sharpens into a vow: whoever fired the shot will face a reckoning, and whoever killed a judge will learn that Port Charles is small but its memory is long. And then there is the future, stepping carefully into the room with Lucky's return. He is not a cure-all, this town does not produce those. But he is a reminder that some departures are intermissions, that some names return to the marquee when the story requires a different kind of courage. On the horizon, attorneys will file, detectives will knock, families will rehearse their testimony in mirror-lit bathrooms, and a house with too many bedrooms will once again host the truth, the lies, and the necessary compromises of a family that only appears immortal because it never stops resurrecting itself. Port Charles has known earthquakes that reshaped the ground and whispers that did more damage than blasts. What approaches now feels like both. A sister demanding a seat at a table that has always insisted it was set. A son trying to be the kind of father a court can trust. A returning brother rewriting the grammar of grief. A woman accused of hoarding the truth only she was forced to hold. Investigators piecing together a night that made widows and headlines, and an estate attempting to choose between the past it owes and the future it cannot avoid. The week will not end anything. It will, however, align the stars over Harborview Road in a configuration that promises two things Port Charles values above all: consequences and second chances.